May 28, 1940, Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring lowered the intelligence report with open disdain. The document summarized President Roosevelt's request to Congress for an unprecedented expansion of American aircraft manufacturing an annual capacity of 50,000 planes. The Americans must be desperate if they think such claims will intimidate us. Göring told his staff, "They understand nothing about wartime production. Let them attempt to convert their automobile factories. They will soon discover that building military aircraft demands more than basic assembly lines." What Göring did not understand was that in Detroit, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already proving the opposite. The former General Motors president, earning just $1 a year as Roosevelt's production chief, was coordinating one of the most ambitious industrial shifts in history. Within 4 years, American factories would produce not the supposedly impossible 50,000 aircraft Göring dismissed, but nearly 100,000 planes annually while supplying 2 major war fronts across opposite oceans at the same time. The statement that sparked German scorn came on May 16, 1940, as German panzers advanced through France. Standing before Congress, Franklin Roosevelt declared, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." The response was doubtful, even among America's allies. In 1939, the United States had manufactured only 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps owned just 1,700 combat planes, many of them outdated. Yet Roosevelt insisted on a 14-fold increase. William Knudsen became the architect of this dramatic expansion. When asked who could accomplish such a massive production goal, Presidential Advisor Bernard Baruch replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." Knudsen had given up his $300,000 salary to serve his adopted country. Bringing modern automotive mass production techniques into aircraft manufacturing, the transformation began quickly. By December 1941, U.S. factories were producing 2,000 military aircraft each month, a 20-fold increase from only 2 years earlier. The Ford Motor Company unveiled plans for a vast bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded operations in Seattle. Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of new workers. The arsenal of democracy was coming to life. German leaders dismissed American capabilities due to prejudice and deliberate ignorance. Yet General Friedrich von Bodecher, the Wehrmacht's military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, continued sending accurate reports on America's rapid industrial mobilization. In a cable sent in December 1940, he warned, Berlin dismissed these warnings as defeatist exaggeration. When Bodecher met Hitler in February 1939 to discuss America's industrial potential, the Führer launched into a rant about supposed American racial decline instead of reviewing actual intelligence findings. Hitler claimed Americans were half Judaized, half negrified, and unfit for long-term warfare. This ideological blindness would become a critical weakness. The prejudice spread through every level of the system. Luftwaffe intelligence rejected reports of women entering aircraft factories, seeing them as signs of American weakness. They failed to imagine that a democratic society, once mobilized, could surpass a centralized dictatorship. When intelligence noted factories running 3 shifts, German analysts assumed the reports were inflated. The Nazi worldview simply could not grasp the scale of American capacity. Ford's Willow Run plant became a symbol of this ambition. Built on open farmland starting April 18, 1941, it grew into the world's largest single-roof factory, 3.5 million square feet with an assembly line a full mile long. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, pledged to build 1 B-24 Liberator bomber every hour, even as other factories produced only 1 per day. Initial performance, however, was disastrous. The first bomber, finished in September 1942, had to be completely rebuilt. Quality control failures reached up to 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run delivered only 56 bombers per month, far below the promised totals. Critics mockingly called it, "Will it run?" Yet Ford engineers continued refining the process. Breaking the B-24's 488,193 parts into manageable subassemblies, they created hydraulic riveting tools, pre-made wiring harnesses, and moving assembly lines. They even handled 578 design changes in 1943 alone while sustaining production. By September 1943, monthly output rose to 148 aircraft. By December, it climbed to 365. The breakthrough came in April 1944, when Willow Run produced 428 B-24s every 63 minutes around the clock. This single plant was surpassing the entire German aviation industry. German pilots were the first to notice America's rising production advantage during the Tunisia campaign. Major Johann Steinhoff of JG-77 observed in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs." Most troubling, there are more of them every day. That realization grew throughout 1943. January 27th marked the first American bombing attack on Germany, itself 64 bombers striking Wilhelmshaven. By October, during Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the U.S. could lose 60 B-17s and replace them within 2 weeks. The arithmetic had become unavoidable during Big Week. From February 20th to 25th, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces launched 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft production sites. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters and, more importantly, around 100 veteran pilots who could not be replaced. General Adolf Galland reported to Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters each month while producing only 1,000. The United States was building 2,500 fighters monthly, while losing around 400. Major Heinz Bauer, one of Germany's leading aces with 220 victories, recalled a January 1944 mission over Brunswick. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon. At least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters facing hundreds. It was hopeless. By 1944, American aircraft production reached extraordinary levels. That year alone, U.S. factories produced 96,270 AIRCR-AFT, 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. The single year of production surpassed Germany's entire wartime output of about 94,677 aircraft. The gap wasn't only in quantity. Every American bomber carried 13.50 caliber machine guns with thousands of rounds, while many German fighters took off with only partial ammunition loads. American bombers also had powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and reliable navigation systems. In contrast, German fighters often flew without working radios. By May 1944, Boeing's Plant 2 in Seattle was building 16 B-17s per day. Douglas Aircraft, which had only 68 employees in 1936, expanded to 167,000 workers across 9 plants. North American Aviation produced 500 P-51 Mustangs each month. Lockheed completed 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, while integrating 2,127 combat-driven improvements. Supporting industries kept the same pace. General Motors delivered 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Packard built 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Alcoa increased aluminum output by 600%. Dow Chemical expanded magnesium production from 6 million pounds a year to 333 million. This industrial shift reshaped America's workforce and broke Nazi assumptions. Women made up less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, but reached 65% by 1943, totaling 310,000 women in the aircraft industry. At Douglas Long Beach, 22,380 of 41,620 workers were women. Rose Will Monroe, the original Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow, run with 99.5% accuracy. Women inspectors at Douglas cut defect rates from 3.2% to 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools for smaller hands, unintentionally increasing productivity. Lighter pneumatic tools lowered fatigue, and better placed workstations reduced injuries. German intelligence saw female labor as a sign of weakness. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed these workers as temporary and predicted failing quality. Instead, precision increased. Women excelled in wiring, instruments, and inspection work. Their presence reflected democratic strength, not decline. As American production grew, Germany turned to unrealistic solutions. Göring approved the Jiger program in February 1944, spreading manufacturing into 729 underground sites using forced labor. The Mittelwerk complex alone used 60,000 prisoners, with 20,000 dying under brutal conditions. These hidden factories produced more defects than usable aircraft. Forced laborers sabotaged parts. Moving materials between scattered sites caused delays. Quality control collapsed. The entire Mittelwerk system produced fewer engines each month than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation advanced even faster. Boeing created modular B-29 assembly across 4 factories with fully interchangeable components. The pressurized B-29, costing $65,000 each, used technology Germany couldn't achieve even in prototypes. By early 1945, the U.S. was producing 100 B-29s a month. June 6, 1944, showed the peak of American industrial power. The invasion used 11,590 Allied aircraft against just 319 German sorties, a 36-to-1 advantage. This wasn't simply tactical superiority, it was industrial dominance. From January to May 1944, preparatory bombing dropped 145,000 tons on German targets, more than all German bombing of Britain during the entire war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in a single day, using more planes than Germany's entire transport fleet ever had. By December 1944, individual missions involved 1,200 bombers supported by 900 fighters. P-51 Mustangs had the range to reach Poland, the performance to challenge any rival, and were built in such numbers that losses hardly mattered. German pilots referred to them as Indians because they appeared everywhere at once. As defeat drew closer, even Nazi leaders recognized the scale of the production crisis. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now appear as dangerous fantasies. We face the world's strongest industrial power with mere rhetoric." Rommel told his staff before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still overpower us. When they arrive, they will bring such material strength that no position can withstand them." Even Hitler admitted to Speer in January 1945, "We should have listened to your reports." Their industrial capacity was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands. Albert Speer later testified that American bombing cut German output by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated clearly that the American raids, carried out through a systematic campaign against industrial sites, caused the collapse of German armament production. Germany's Me-262 jet fighter, operational by mid-1944, was a true breakthrough, about 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring believed this advanced aircraft could restore air superiority despite being outnumbered. Yet Germany manufactured only 1,430 Me-262s in total, with rarely more than 200 flight-ready at the same time. The engines needed major maintenance every 10 hours, and shortages of key materials forced the use of lower-quality substitutes. Meanwhile, the United States had begun jet work in 1942, although the Bell P-59 fell short of German jet performance. Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star superior to any German jet entered production before the war ended. American industry had the breadth to develop multiple technologies at once, a capability Germany could not match. This contrast reflected the broader result of the production war. German advances in jet design meant little when the United States could deliver thousands of conventional fighters, while also creating the next generation of aircraft. In total war, quality without sufficient quantity offered no advantage. Hermann Göring's capture on May 8, 1945, by elements of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division marked the beginning of his confrontation with these realities. At first, he remained defiant at the interrogation facility in Augsburg, insisting German technology had been better and defeated only by greater numbers. His transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, the center for high-level Nazi prisoners, led to deeper questioning. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted extensive interviews that recorded Göring's growing acknowledgement of American industrial dominance. "I knew American industrial potential was enormous," Göring admitted to Heckler. "But their execution surpassed even my worst expectations. That one factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber fleet at its height. It was beyond understanding." He expressed deep surprise at American logistics. The ability to supply forces across two oceans while still maintaining strong production at home was something he had never imagined. Germany struggled to support troops 500 miles from its borders. Yet the United States managed to supply full armies 5,000 miles from home. During his trial at Nuremberg, prosecutors showed Göring extensive evidence of America's overwhelming industrial advantage. Charts demonstrated that by 1944, the United States was producing more aircraft in a single month than Germany could build in an entire year. Footage of the Willow Run assembly lines played as prosecutors listed the German cities destroyed by bombers built at that one factory. Göring's testimony on March 14, 1946 revealed how difficult it was for him to grasp the scale of this production. "I believe the economic and technical potential of the United States was unusually high, especially its Air Force," he said. "But I never imagined they could increase aircraft output 100-fold in just 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert documented Göring's fixation on production numbers. He repeatedly recalculated ratios, comparing the output of a single American factory to that of all German facilities combined. He became especially focused on Willow Run, referring to it as that damned factory that broke our backs. When shown that the United States had produced 812,615 aircraft engines compared to Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the figures without responding. The numerical reality of defeat was impossible to deny. The scale of the transformation remains remarkable even today. From producing 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, the United States reached a total of 295,959. By the end of the war, 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other aircraft. This expansion reflected not only massive quantity, but also clear superiority in production systems and organization. At its peak, 2 million Americans worked in aircraft manufacturing, representing an unprecedented range of backgrounds. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and older citizens all contributed. This broad voluntary mobilization achieved results that totalitarian control could not match. Cooperation outperformed coercion by every measure. Workers who entered factories in 1941 with little or no knowledge of aviation left in 1945 as the most skilled aircraft workforce in the world. They did more than assemble planes, they reshaped modern manufacturing. Statistical quality control created for bomber production became a global industrial standard, and the automation techniques developed at Willow Run helped transform manufacturing around the world. The engineers who once built bomber assembly lines later designed the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24s went on to raise the children who eventually walked on the moon. The production miracle didn't end with the Allied victory. It helped launch the American century. Its financial scale challenged traditional economic thinking. Aircraft production absorbed $45 billion in 1940s, roughly $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone exceeded the cost of the Manhattan Project, yet instead of pushing America toward bankruptcy, wartime manufacturing created unmatched economic growth. Unemployment, a major burden during the Depression years, disappeared entirely. Personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. Workers themselves financed much of the expansion through war bond purchases. At Willow Run, employees alone bought $45 million in bonds, effectively helping fund their own plant's operations. Germany, meanwhile, directed 40% of its total industrial capacity toward aircraft production by 1944, yet still produced less than half of America's output. Reliance on slave labor became a major liability. Sabotage was widespread. Manufacturing quality collapsed. Productivity per German worker actually fell after 1943, while American productivity rose by 300%. The industrial base built for war became the backbone of post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters originally made for bomber programs later supplied materials for suburban housing. Chemical plants that produced aviation fuel shifted to making plastics for consumer products. Machine tool factories that supported aircraft construction equipped American industries for global leadership. Beyond sheer output, organizational coordination played a crucial role. The War Production Board managed 184,000 companies with remarkable efficiency. IBM punch card machines monitored millions of components across countless suppliers. MIT's Radiation Laboratory, staffed with 4,000 scientists, created navigation systems that gave American bombers reliable all-weather capability. When combat exposed the B-17's vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing installed Chin turrets within 60 days. When the Pacific Theater demanded longer range, Consolidated modified the B-24 without halting production. German updates, in contrast, often required months or even years. American improvements were delivered in weeks. This adaptability proved as important as output. U.S. aircraft evolved constantly based on global combat data. Information moved from Pacific battlefields to Atlantic production lines within days. German aircraft, built in isolated underground sites with forced labor, remained largely unchanged while American designs advanced continuously. The feedback loop between combat and industry reached a level never seen before. Pilot reports reached engineers immediately. Engineering changes reached assembly lines within days. Suggestions from factory workers reached designers directly. This open, collaborative exchange of information proved far more effective than the rigid German command structure. On October 15, 1946, just hours before his planned execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he offered his most direct acknowledgement of how central the production war had been. The Americans prevailed through industrial strength, not superior military skill. They were not defeated by better soldiers, but by more capable factories. The nation many believed could only make consumer products ended up overwhelming the Wehrmacht with aluminum and steel. His final recorded statement to Gilbert made this clear. We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it woke up, our fate was sealed. They didn't just outproduce us. They changed the entire method of production. Every part of their system proved more effective than ours. Göring committed suicide that night, but his last testimony remains history's judgment on the production war. The Reichsmarshal, who once dismissed America's abilities, died knowing that a single American plant had built more aircraft than his entire Air Force produced over its lifetime. Military historians widely agree that American production was the key factor in Allied victory. Without this overwhelming supply advantage, D-Day would not have been possible. The bombing campaign could not have continued, and the Pacific War would likely have been lost. Richard Overy, one of the leading historians of the Air War, concluded, "The outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. The Allies won because they buried their enemies under unmatched output. The numbers prove it completely." By 1944, the United States alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, both Axis and Allied. This was not a small edge, but dominance on an entirely different scale. Germany faced not just defeat, but complete industrial collapse. Yet the significance of this production miracle went beyond the battlefield. It demonstrated the strength of democracy over dictatorship, the advantages of freedom over repression, and the power of voluntary cooperation over forced labor. The workers who made this transformation possible were not coerced. They were free citizens working toward a shared goal. Hermann Göring's dismissal of American industrial capacity became one of history's greatest errors. His disregard for democratic economic potential cost Germany the war and millions of lives. His failure to understand what American factories could achieve sealed the Third Reich's fate long before the first bomber reached German airspace. The shift from producing 3,000 aircraft a year to 100,000 showed that free societies, when threatened, can accomplish extraordinary things. American workers did not simply meet Roosevelt's ambitious goal, they doubled it. They did not only equal German aircraft output, they surpassed it 5 times over, while also fighting a major war in the Pacific. Modern leaders should remember Göring's mistake, underestimating democratic nations because they value peace, or assuming free societies cannot scale production because they focus on prosperity, can lead to dangerous miscalculations. America in 1940 seemed unprepared for conflict. By 1944, it had become an unmatched industrial force. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines could be as decisive as battlefields, that factory workers could influence victory as much as soldiers, and that industrial mobilization could shape outcomes as effectively as military planning. Göring learned this lesson too late, and his nation paid the price. From his dismissive response to Roosevelt's announcement in May 1940 to his execution at Nuremberg in October 1946, his path reflected the downfall of Nazi Germany. His refusal to recognize American manufacturing strength became the epitaph of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with capability, equated tyranny with power, and believed racial theories could outweigh industrial reality. The Reichsmarshal, who once mocked American aircraft production, died knowing that U.S. factories produced more planes in 1944 alone than Germany built throughout the entire war. His scorn for democratic industry became one of history's most costly errors, paid for through complete defeat. America produced 295,959 military aircraft. Germany produced 94,677. But the real success was not measured in totals, but in approach. It showed that free workers could outperform forced labor, that democratic teamwork could surpass strict authoritarian control, and that a nation built by immigrants and people of many backgrounds could come together to achieve what once seemed unreachable. The B-24 bombers leaving Willow Run every 63 minutes were more than machines. They were democracy's reply to oppression. Each rivet was placed by a woman who had been a homemaker only months before. Each engine was assembled by a teenager who left school to contribute. Each wing came together under the hands of workers who had escaped hardship and prejudice. All demonstrated that free societies, united by a just purpose, could overwhelm tyranny through sheer collective effort. Hermann Göring once mocked the idea that America could build 50,000 aircraft a year. The United States answered by producing twice that number, reshaping world events in the process. His laughter now stands as a reminder of a grave misjudgment, the failure to understand the strength of democratic industry. In the end, both democracy and production buried him, and everything he stood for beneath more than 300,000 aircraft that turned his scorn into one of history's most decisive defeats.